know Beth needs this recording.
She always beats me to it. No, that was Rebecca.
So good. All right, so it is Wednesday, November 9th, and I'll call the meeting to order of the Executive Committee at 10 a.m. Beth, would you please do a roll call?
Davis. I'll look for it. I see his chat. Thank you. Dilger.
Here.
Leffler.
Here.
McNulty.
Here.
Rosenthal.
Here.
Shepherd.
Here.
And Smith.
Here.
And for CCS, we have Rebecca Malinowski, Deborah Wishmeyer, and Beth Stumper.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have any additions to the agenda?
I
Steve?
have a question because I wasn't at governing board, just regarding TSIS. So it could be anywhere.
Let's see. Should we add that under business? Then Rebecca?
Oh,
Yeah,
It's already
we've got-
under.
Yeah.
Actually, it's under there. I didn't
Under
realize.
member concerns,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Okay,
okay.
excellent. All right. Seeing no others, we'll move on to public comment. I don't see anybody attending from the pub. He's in and he can talk. That's great, Scott. Thank you. All right. Seeing no public comment, we'll move on to the consent agenda as listed in the agenda. I would entertain a motion for approval of the consent agenda.
I'll move
This is
approval of
Yep.
the consent agenda.
Jeannie will second.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Jeannie. And Beth?
Davis.
Yes.
Thank you. Dilger.
Yes.
Leffler.
Yes.
McNulty.
Yes,
Rosenthal.
Yes.
Shepherd.
Yes.
And Smith.
Yes. Thank you. Moving on to business, the office move recommendation. So the team is seeking approval of the letter of intent, direction from our committee to continue negotiating the lease. If there are questions, Rebecca and Beth can help us out with those. Seeing none. Rebecca, is there anything you ask, or did somebody wave and I missed it?
Sorry, I was just wondering, has this been approved by like our attorney? Just as I see this isn't something that I'm well versed in, right? I mean, it looks good to
Sure.
me, but I don't know that I'm, you know.
Yeah, so the in terms of process, the letter of intent is really just to like show commitment to the space so we can negotiate without them leasing the space to someone else. So the next step would be to have our real estate agent draw up a lease, which would go to the attorney. So we did discuss with the real estate agent, like, should we send this to the attorney? And his advice was to save the legal fees until we had the lease. And this is just sort of like the general terms of the deal, which I'm happy to discuss further if anyone has questions about that or wants kind of a rundown of what that is.
Thank you.
Okay, if there is, we could entertain a motion to move forward with approval of the office move recommendation.
I would move to approve the letter of intent as presented.
I'll second. Pam.
Thank you, Lauren. Thank you, Pam. Any further discussion? I forgot that part. All right, Beth, take it away. Thank you.
Davis.
Yes.
Dilger.
Yes.
Leffler.
Yes.
McNulty.
yes,
Rosenthal.
Yes.
Shepherd.
Yes.
Ms. Smith.
Yes. Okay, motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to new and potential members. Thank you for the update on the Warren Newport project. Are there any questions, or Rebecca, anything you would add about Warren Newport?
I did have a call with Innovative yesterday. They our services has some concerns that in the past they quoted us sort of like a base level project amount for the library ad. And that when they went back this time and actually reviewed the hours they tracked, that was significantly higher than what they had charged us for. So we're having some discussions. I am looking for some additional documentation. They've just given us sort of a flat number of hours that, you know, is sort of nebulous as to what's happening in those hours. The short story is that we will be able to proceed with the amount that we quoted for Warren Newport, but CCS staff will take on some additional work. And Deborah and I will actually be talking about this later today at our one-on-one. It is work that we've done before, just sort of not on this scale. And then we'll kind of see how that goes for Warren Newport and how we want to then handle it for Mount Prospect, if it's worth it to pay the higher service fees to Innovative to have them do it, or if the cost savings, which are like $20,000, not adjusted for like the cost of Deborah's team's staff time. But we don't pay them $200 an hour. My plan is that we'll see how it goes with Warren Newport with us doing this additional work, and then revisit with Mount Prospect when we get to that stage. So it's not my favorite, but we're working on it.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments about the Warren Newport project? All right, then Rebecca gives us a great segue into the Mount Prospect project. And I understand the team is seeking feedback on provisional membership for Mount Prospect. So we talked about, Rebecca and I previously, about how we can help both the Mount Prospect Library and CCS feel the agreement to join is valid when work won't go live for at least a year after the vote. So Rebecca, is there anything you would add to this before we entertain questions?
I would just reiterate that Mount Prospect did consider moving forward with the Warren Newport timeline, but just felt that was a little bit too accelerated. So, I mean, theoretically, they'd be available to go live before the date in your packet, which we have of October 2024. But in terms of CCS staff time and projects, you know, doing 2 libraries at once, it's a big deal, but it's like that sort of bucket of time is accounted for, whereas doing, you know, library 1 January through October, and then starting library 2, like, you know, in August of that same time period, would just be a level of complexity and it's overwhelmingness that I would not recommend. So that October 2024, that January kickoff and that October go live, those are CCS proposals. So I do want to be mindful of that as we're looking for how we can work successfully with Mount Prospect, that we've asked them, like, okay, if you can't do this timeline, can you wait and do it over here?
So I have a lot of questions about this.
I figured there'd be a lot of questions. Yeah.
And let me start by going on record and saying I am all in favor of Mount Prospect joining us, as I am with any library. But I need to understand what provisional membership means, and I don't see anything in the bylaws or, you know, what's the definition of that? Is there a reduced rate? Can Sue vote? You know, what do they get and what do they not get as provisional members?
Yeah, and that's kind of what I'd like to talk to this group about, because it doesn't exist. It's not a thing that we have. So, you know, it's a term that I'm kind of like throwing out there, that we're like provisionally approving their membership, you know, between as we wait to get closer, because So I'm going to take your questions kind of one by one. The first question is it in our bylaws? No, it's not a thing that exists. What we're really looking for is, they want to formalize this decision for them to say like, yes, we're going to join CCS in this period. We're not going to like do additional work on our Horizon system. We're going to be in maintenance mode until we do this migration to CCS. So they are looking to have like a confirmation from CCS that like, yes, we're going to accept them. We've got this project slated in, even though you're really like not a member yet. Because if governing board just votes and says like, yes, now they're a CCS member, to Jeannie's second question, there would be billing associated with that. And we do a prorated billing during the implementation period to reflect that there is, of course, a CCS staff time component, but you're not a full member. You're a full member, but you're not getting the full benefit of being live on CCS and circulating your materials on our system. But we're looking at a period from, like, we're looking at a 12-month period between which, we want to say, yes, absolutely, Mount Prospect, we want you to join. We've slotted this into our workload, but no work is happening. So what would we be billing them for? Like, they're not using CCS staff time. We're not helping them with their Horizon system. We don't know anything about Horizon systems. So they would not be billed between January 2023 and January 2024. So to that end, like, yeah, it's kind of weird to say that they're a member because they're not. We're just saying like, okay, when we're ready to start this process, governing board will vote again, dot the I's, cross the T's. So Sue, Mount Prospect and Sue are willing to do whatever makes the most sense from CCS. Sue was very clear. She does not want to step on any toes and like insert herself as like, I'm a full governing board member when she's not billing. But if like having some skin in the game and showing up to meetings is something that the group would like to see, she's very open to doing that. So in terms of like, what does this entail? It entails whatever we want it to entail. They are willing to pay their full investment in the CCS development fund in that year between that provisional, like, yeah, we'd love you to be a CCS member, but we're not going to start this project for a year. So they're willing to pay like $30,000 that year as like their commitment to CCS. When asked like, okay, like, you want to just wait a year and we'll vote? Like, why do we have to do this vote at all? So if something were to happen and Sue were to leave Mount Prospect, she would like to make sure that it's for everybody's sake. Or again, if like I leave CCS, like neither of us is looking to go anywhere, but that there is some documented agreement that Mount Prospect has decided to do this and CCS is on board with their membership. How can we kind of formalize that with acknowledging that they're not like, we're not doing a project, they're not circulating, they're not getting any member benefits yet. So that's what we're looking for today is like, how do we do this? What's your recommendation? What are the concerns that you have?
So I want to ask about sort of the last thing you said there. Would Sue feel comfortable? To me, provisional membership the word provisional indicates that they have some hoops still to jump through to become a full member. And so I don't think that's necessarily the right word here, although I'm not opposed to it. But would just saying we are accepting you as a member effective January of 2024, just putting an effective date on that, satisfy their concerns about, sort of cementing this commitment just in case? Or would they prefer to be some sort of member already in 2023?
I think that they would be very satisfied with the scenario you've set out. My concern was more from the CCS side because, and I'd have to look back at the language. It says like, as soon as governing board votes, they're a member. And like, there's that, idea that billing would start. I'm comfortable with putting an effective date on there. If this committee is comfortable with that and feels that their colleagues on governing board would be comfortable with that as well. I think that's a great solution.
I think one concern that I would have though, if you do that, is if they're gonna pay CCS money and they're not a member, that's kind of an awkward, there's a little bit of awkwardness to that. Like if they're basically paying the development fund of $30,000, but they're not a member,
Hmm.
that might get a little, legally, I just think that that could create a potential issue. So I think that that is something to at least to consider in this situation.
What if we pass a resolution as a board acknowledging that they are going to be they've been accepted for membership at this future date, and attach to it a price schedule for like set prices for any services that may be performed until their official membership date starts? Might be simple.
Do you feel like that acknowledges Brian's concern? Or so you're saying that we pass a resolution saying that they're like a member in January 2023. So they're a member at that time, and here's a price we just
No,
bill them
that they'd
for
be a
any
future member
services.
at a certain date, but any services we perform for them until then are just services rendered, like contractually, on an as done basis. But with the acknowledgement, I figure resolution is a bit of a legal binding agreement that we agree that you will be our member. But if you want to make them a member on January 1, then you got to give them voting rights too. It's not just the
Yeah, and
Monday.
I think you could do that either way. I mean, I guess, Rebecca, to your point, I think you can do that either way. Either you say that they're a member January 2023, and then set in a resolution where you say, here's the payment schedule based on, what the timeline of the project is. I mean, I'm just thinking about like CCS did that for Indian Trails when we joined, about the CCS development fund and how we handled that. So I think there is precedent for changing, maybe how payments are done. So I think you could actually make that work in this case, and they would be a member January 2023, but then you would just simply say, here's what the expected kind of schedule of costs are going to be over the time until you become, until you're up and running on the system.
Any other thoughts?
I'm
or-
nodding. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess if we were gonna do that, one thing I'm thinking, I mean, and obviously Sue has been president of this organization, so I have no problem with her participating, but I think maybe what might make sense in that scenario that Brian and Scott were sort of proposing would be if Sue or her representative attended maybe as a non-voting member until 2024, and then once they're paying, they could vote. I don't know what other people think about that.
I think, getting hung up on what they're paying, I mean, Sue's indicated that Mount Prospect is willing to pay, but it doesn't mean that we have to accept that, right? I mean, we could say, to keep it cleaner, you can attend the meetings as a non-voting member, we can pass a resolution, whatever, but we don't necessarily have to take any of their money till they actually join, right? I mean, because she's willing doesn't mean that that's kind of a given, I guess.
Yeah, I do think that they would actually prefer to pay the development fund fee in that year previous, just to spread the costs out. But I mean, we could bump the January 2024 approval potentially to like October 2024, and they could pay that between October and December and then start their regular billing in that we could work out. I can talk with Sue about that. I'm hearing in general that a resolution saying that we accept their membership with a price schedule is comfortable for folks. I don't think that we're necessarily at a consensus between like voting and non-voting in that first kind of questionable, that 2023 year. Is that what?
I think if we're gonna
We're
take their money, that they have to be a voting member, right? I mean,
Yeah, and
They
I
they
think,
only vote on future, anything that would affect any future, any actions we take from when they become a full-fledged member. Maybe they should have a say in that. But I'm thinking like, Puerto Rico and District of Columbia will take your money, but you don't get a representation.
right, and I was thinking conversely to what Pam said, I think the membership would be concerned if they're allowed to vote and they haven't given us any money. So I think the voting and the money should be tied together.
So, God, I cannot believe it is November. I will set up another call with Sue, and maybe Heidi, we get you on that call as well before our December meeting. Because what we're looking for in December is a recommendation from this body to governing board. So I'd like that the recommendation to include the full resolution, so I can work on that between now and then and have Sue and Heidi work with me on that. Heidi, are you okay that I'm just like volunteering you for this?
You bet.
Okay. And then if we need to make any adjustments to it at that December meeting, we can. But in general, we're on board with feeling like we'd be able to recommend something in December that will satisfy both parties, and then governing board can vote in January.
I think the timeline makes a lot of sense from my perspective. And, the idea of a resolution that captures the expectations. I think that big question then is the money changing hand and the voting coming along with it, being the main question. And if Mount Prospect feels like they really want that, at least the money, the payment part, then, I think it'd be wise for us to come back and talk about it again if we're here. But to me, it sounds like, just my opinion here, not presidenting over you guys, but it sounds like the resolution will do it from our perspective. And so then we need to hear if it meets Mount Prospect's needs. Does that feel like an adequate summary? Okay, so then we'll have that follow-up call, and if it meets their needs, great, and that's how we can move forward. And if it doesn't, we'll come back and say, they also asked for this at our December executive committee. Okay. Thank
If-
you.
Heidi, one final follow-up question to that. If Sue isn't comfortable with this and is asking for something else, how do we as a group feel about Rebecca inviting her to our December executive committee meeting?
I think that sounds really wise. Do you see Rebecca nodding? So thank you. Great suggestion. Thank you. Okay. Rebecca, do you feel like you have what you need from us on this one? Okay.
Yes, thank
There's
you.
nothing further on this topic. We'll move on to member concerns. Number 1, TISA. Here we go, Diane. So let's see. So it looks like the team has followed up here in early November. Do you have an update for us, Rebecca? Have they followed up with you?
No, I emailed our rep again to ask for an update, and I haven't heard back. So I don't have anything of interest.
Well,
So-
thank you.
I have a question for Lauren. Based on the notes that I received from the person that filled in for me last month at governing board, we were able to get the $45 fee off. Was there some type of PCI fee that you were able to get off? We were able to get a PCI non-compliance fee off, but they changed the company that does it this time and we didn't pass. So then we had to pay it. And so I'm not sure what else, because we're paying, first off, we're paying the various fees. We're paying PCI scannable of $14.75 a month. we're paying processing fees, authorization fees, and then we've got the total fees. But we're talking 11 to 18% in fees, depending on if we have that non-compliance fee on there or not.
Yeah, I mean, we pay the same processing and authorization and the 1475. We just don't pay the PCI non-compliance because we did the testing in December and passed.
Mhm.
Means it's coming up again next month. So if they change the company, we may fail next month.
Oh, sorry.
I wouldn't be surprised. And I will say, TSIS is also being a pain now. I'd love if the rep would get back to you. So now TSIS is saying that we are a sole proprietorship and they're not going to update stuff unless Matt Womack updates stuff. Right? I mean,
Okay. Yeah,
so
I think,
yeah, I feel like they are definitely doing their best to try to put roadblocks up to any improvement.
okay. Yeah, because we still have Karen. Karen's been gone since December. And we can't get her name off. We've got some of the new people's names on, but yeah.
They insist this whole account is under Matt Womack's social security number, which we find very difficult to believe.
Yeah.
Since CPS is the one that set this up. Like,
Right.
I don't think so.
Right. Okay. Alrighty, so we're all in the same boat, basically. And was there any concern if we, because we have two accounts, one for in-house and one for online. Any issues if we drop the one that's for online payments?
So that was kind of, we were like waiting for this repricing info back. We talked about at governing board last month, we talked about what if CCS, well, a couple of things. One, so it was like a governing board decision to say everyone's going to use Comprise for online payments.
Mhm.
So governing board in January can vote to say libraries can do whatever they want for online payments.
Okay.
So that is one option. And then libraries can, put a link to ePay or whatever. The other thing we talked about at governing board that we very clearly did not have consensus on was CCS opening an account, having a merchant account and having all of the just for online stuff. Anything in library would still be handled by in library, and just having all of the online payments go through CCS because that would eliminate duplicate monthly fees. However, we would not be then like sorting out whose $1.25 or $20 went to who. And so some libraries were working on taking credit cards for more things like passport applications, et cetera. We could potentially have a separate, we could have an opt-in service if we want to, where CCS offers, a group merchant account for anyone. We'd have to figure out, again, like how we want to do that for libraries that do and don't participate, if that merchant account, is actually getting money, like how do we deal with that? But that is an option. I think probably again, I will follow up with Mo again, but I can't imagine they're going to come back with something that is a significant savings for folks. I think that it is probably most appropriate for a governing board to say, to lift this requirement. We have said in the meantime, you can go ahead and take the link off, but you're still then paying your monthly fees. So that doesn't really help anyone. So that's kind of where I'm at now. Our rep is specifically for new sales. So he's like, I don't really do this, but I'll submit it for you and we'll see if I can get someone to help. So I'll nudge him again. The folks I talked to in customer service, I think, as you all know, were not helpful.
Yeah.
So
Customer service is pretty much non-existent. Yeah, because our online, so in the last year, July 2021 through June 2022 numbers were, we had $560.17, and out of that, we paid $227.72 in fees and only received $333. So it's like half is getting flushed down the toilet.
Yeah, and I think especially with the move to fine free, 27 of our members don't charge overdue fees now. So we're looking specifically at replacement and sort of like other fee, like, so there's maybe less of a
Right.
need for that. There's fewer people making payments, although on the other hand, your payments should be larger, maybe. I don't know.
Well, even
So-
with, in June 2022, even with 0, we still paid $18.08 in fees. And so that was a negative 1808.
We're completely underwater with the TISA
Yeah.
stuff. We have not made any money off of this, so.
Yeah,
And-
so I mean, at this point, oh, go ahead.
So we had last month, we had the discussion about having CCS do all the online transactions. And the dilemma with, sorry, my work phone is ringing here. The dilemma for us is we don't have an in-house TSYS account. We only use the online, and that's how we're paying for everything. And I wanted to confirm that before I said that last month, but yeah, we don't have the payment option on the self-checks. So we're always making money on the TSYS account, because even if someone is paying for something in-house, they're using a tablet and using the online version, so.
Can I ask about kind of like the history of why we were using a single platform for everybody on the online portion? Was that for patron convenience, so they saw the same thing across the board? And if so,
Yes.
we have to weigh how important is that to continue? And should we look for another better single platform solution, or are we back to 27 different versions of payments?
So the original goal was to have a streamlined universal patron experience. And we actually only looked at 2 vendors because we were told there were only 2 vendors that integrate with Polaris, with PowerPack. And, since that time, the integration has not actually worked the way that we would have wanted it to work. So it's not fully integrated. It's just a link that's on top of PowerPack. When someone logs in, like originally what was supposed to happen is someone would log in, and then kind of as you'd expect, you'd have like checkboxes where someone could click like, I want to pay these 3 payments right within PowerPack My Account and complete the payment. We have not been able to do that integration because of how the system was built to handle multiple merchant accounts. Essentially, any non-CCS patron could not pay fines online. Because they would not see a payment option. It was tied to the patron's registered branch. So if I'm a Wilmette patron and I log into the Winnetka PowerPack to pay my fees under this setting that we don't have turned on, my payment would go to Wilmette, not Winnetka, even if I was like standing in the Winnetka library. So that was a little weird. But the biggest issue was for like, all of our Skokie patrons or Chicago patrons or, Warren Newport, any of those patrons would not have the option to pay online. So we didn't do that full integration. We just had this link online. So from my perspective, that promised integration was a big reason that we were looking at everybody doing the same thing, because it was the only one that would work. But then when they actually finished it, that's not how it worked. So I don't feel like that's as big of an issue as we had thought it would be in 2017. I mean, we can look for another payment option. I mean, I think certainly the most cost-effective option would be ePay. It is not attractive, or like if you're just looking for cost, on the basis of very little research, I would say that would be the best option. I know that Vega is being developed with PayPal in mind, which is reportedly has less monthly fees than other platforms, but I don't have a lot of info on that. So I'd be comfortable with just saying libraries can do what they choose. Lauren, sorry, I'm just chattering away.
No, and I'm just to confirm, ePay, that's the Illinois State Treasurer. Okay, and that they now have a tablet solution, and they're advertising that they're gonna be the lowest cost option for Illinois governments in terms of the fees that they charge. I did have a phone call from ePay trying to sell me on integrating that solution, and attended a whatever webinar conference. So I mean, that did sound very appealing. Now, whether CCS should do it or whether it's just presented as a good option for libraries to individually determine what they want to do, I'm neither here nor there on that, but.
Well, that's interesting you say that, Lauren, because I've been an ePay customer since like 2006. Our point of sale credit card acceptance, it's ePay Illinois, gives you the cheapest credit card rates. You don't have to pass on the fee. We absorb the fee like any other merchant would. And it's used as an analog phone line, although our analog phone lines are going away, so I have to change that. But PCI is a breeze with the analog phone line into the credit card machine. I do not know about their online payment though, like if they've improved that, because the ePay online portal was always clunky and takes the patron away to a completely different page. That was one of the reasons I remember for consolidation, and the promised integration was so patrons didn't get confused when it gets swept away to some completely different payment page.
One thing
Deborah,
that seems to be, sorry, and it's still going on, is promised. Everything is promised, right? Things were promised in 2017. Things are still being promised now, and how much better it's going to be. And yet, yeah.
Deborah, are Share and Pinnacle using ePay, or just, I remember there was some discussion about ePay and Leap and stuff.
I'm not 100% sure. But I can-
Okay, that's fine. We can follow up on that if folks are interested, but one of the other consortia, at least in Illinois, was like pushing for ePay integration. And I don't know if it was staff, I'd have to go back and look at what it was, but it was one of our pals in Illinois.
Well,
Yeah,
I'll
I
take
think the benefit for CCS doing something together would be if we had one account that was then reducing those monthly fees by, 1/28. But then for folks who don't have an in-house system, that's going to be a big detriment. So at this time, I think my recommendation would be that libraries choose independently how they want to manage online payments. We can certainly help to make some recommendations, but unless libraries want to commit to those funds all being pooled, it doesn't, the benefit of doing everything together, if there's not going to be, to Scott's point, that kind of seamless integration is, I think, really minimal.
I agree with that as the way to go. However, if in January we say we're gonna cut loose, then libraries that only have the online solution are gonna no longer have a solution, correct?
No, I mean, you have an individual contract with Comprise and with TSYS. Like, I won't cancel. Well, so we have the group contract with Comprise, which, I mean, we can keep that and keep the pricing and just opt libraries out as needed and deal with that billing. It's not a huge amount. It's like $15,000 for all 28 libraries. So we can look at that, and I'll have a recommendation for December or January on how we deal with that.
So it would be nice if we had a representative that could talk to us about it or talk to you about it so that we can figure out what we need to do. I mean,
Representative from
TSYS, because perhaps you can get your costs down too if people drop out. I mean, it doesn't,
yeah.
They don't make sense, but anyway, they do what they can. I think my staff feels like they're charging us these PCI fees because they lost the income from the other fee that they were charging us that we never authorized. So, it's like about the money for them and they don't get back to us at all. So anyway,
And if CCS is also paying $500 per library, and Diane only made $300 last year net of fees on her transactions, they're underwater, right? I mean,
Right.
it's cost you $200 total
right,
to
right.
accept the payments.
Yeah, I do just want to be clear that the Comprise and TSIS are two different companies doing two different things. Yes, it all goes into the same pool, but Comprise is like the online platform and the gateway, and then TSIS is just doing the credit card processing and that connection with your bank. So you can't have Comprise without a TSIS. You could change processors, and you can't just have TSIS with the contract that you have. You'd have to have another kind of front, and they may offer one. I'm sure Heartland does, but that's kind of where we're at.
Okay.
But yeah,
So
Have a preferred vendor that integrates well enough with them. So I mean, that's a big part of it too. What does a patron see when they go to pay? Does it have any connection to the catalog and what the dollar amount you owe is, or they have to remember what the amount was and type it into some weird third-party thing that doesn't integrate well?
yeah, and yes, I will do some additional research and have some info at governing board. I'm not super optimistic about repricing with TSIS, but I will keep nudging our pals over there. I can call customer service back too, and she was just a delight. I was like, well, do you think it was set up incorrectly for all 28 libraries? And do you think my library should be penalized if someone set something up incorrectly for all 28 libraries? And she's like, well, they didn't put their email in, so they have to pay that fee. And I was like, you're a ridiculous human. So thank you for your time. You are not helpful to me. So I could call customer service back. Maybe I won't get Amber this time.
So can I speak with anyone besides Amber? Well, this sounds like, I mean, it's a murky, difficult situation, but I think that sounds like the most logical, if it doesn't need to be a requirement of the consortium, to move forward with this as the option. So thank you for staying all over this, Rebecca. And just to reiterate, the next step for this will be?
I will be doing some additional research. Well, I'll be following up with TSIS on pricing, and I'll be doing some additional research on what it could look like if it were not a requirement.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Any further discussion on TSIS? All right, fantastic. Next on the list is innovative updates for partner development program. What we need to accomplish is, how best to present or frame the discussion with governing board in January about the partnership development program. I'd love to turn this over to Rebecca to make comment, and then any questions anybody has.
So I think at the last governing board meeting, there were some different opinions on what governing board is/should be voting on in January and how we should approach that. So in talking with Heidi, I do think it makes sense to kind of strategize a little bit on what information is most productive to present. And by strategize, I don't mean like trick everyone into voting how I want them to vote. I mean, making sure that we're all on the same page on what we're voting about. What we talked about at governing board and what Heidi and I have talked about is kind of our ongoing participation in this program. Not necessarily which, if we say this program is not for us, then we say, okay, we're still using PowerPack. And, we look at in our strategic plan, if it makes sense for us to do a wider investigation into discovery platforms. So Deborah is working with Kathleen, who is recently back from family leave. Congratulations to Kathleen on Sweet Baby Autumn. Kathleen will be basically rerunning some PowerPack testing that we did using Vega instead of PowerPack. So we'll have some direct comparisons to say users are better at X task in Y platform. So users, were happier with PowerPack for this or happier with Vega for this. So that will be some data that we can use to say, as it currently is developed, Vega is or is not a comparable, better, worse tool. The user advisory group will be meeting in December. And Deborah, correct me if I'm made up on these dates.
January.
So we'll be meeting in January, right before governing board, to review the results of that user testing. And then we are asking them to make a recommendation to governing board, so you have some staff input. In your packet, I have some sample recommendations that they might choose to make. This is not an exhaustive list. So they may say, you know what, things are pretty good shape. Like, let's go ahead with a soft launch with some volunteer beta libraries and use the next 3 months to gather some additional data with more users. Or they might say, you know what, this isn't ready for prime time, but still seems like a really good product. So let's stay with it and keep on with our advocacy role, saying that consortia needs are important and here's how you should address them. Or they might say, like, this isn't ready for prime time. It's not going to be ready for prime time. Like, let's just drop the program. Or they might recommend something else. I don't know yet. So that is information that 100% I will have prepped and ready for governing board to review and discuss. One question I have for this committee is, what, if any, and how much information do we actually want to present on competitors outside of PowerPack, because we're not doing a full RFP? So I'm a little bit concerned. Like, I understand you want to know what the landscape is outside of Vega and PowerPack. That makes sense to me. And we did provide some of that in the packet, in that supplemental info from the packet last month. But I'm a little bit concerned about getting bogged down and turning this development partner program decision into a full-fledged discovery RFP. So that's what I'm interested in feedback on from this group, and anything else that you'd like to see presented in January about Vega.
This is a big, hairy question. Does anyone have a preliminary thought to get us going on this discussion?
I like having a seat at the table, and I'm a big believer in trying to push product enhancements up the stream. And I think if you don't have that seat at the table, you're not going to see any action. I don't think it's a huge cost. The biggest cost, I think, is your staff time.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. Any other thoughts?
And I apologize. Maybe I came late to the Vega party. And until last meeting, I didn't really even understand what Vega was, what we were talking about with the Vega discussions. But last month I thought was really, really helpful. And I appreciate, Heidi, you saying how this is a big, hairy question, because I'm not even sure. I'm not even sure what the question is. So, but it makes me want to come back to the beginning and say, well, what were we hoping to get out of Vega?
Yeah, and that's a great point, Lauren. Executive committee has turned over twice since we started with Vega. So the folks who said, yeah, join that development partner program, for the most part, are not on this committee anymore. So a little bit of background is that it's 50-50. We were approached / I approached them. I had kind of put a bug in our rep's ear previously, like, if there are development opportunities, if there is an opportunity to give, pre-beta feedback, like once a product is out, it's like the changes are all really incremental. If there's ever a chance for us to participate, we want to know about it. So when Vega was being developed, they approached us and said, we'd love consortial partners. Do you want to join? So I'm not going to go through this whole shebang, but I'll share that. Can you see this? You see these slides? Okay. And I can send this out too if you'd like to review it. There's not a ton in here. But Vega is planned as a complete library management system. We are development partners for Discover, the discovery platform. So, this is an innovative sales doc on what they're trying to do with Vega, but I'm going to jump. So being a development partner, what are the benefits? It's this opportunity to give feedback, as Scott said, to have a seat at the table, to influence prioritization of features, and we get early access to this product for our library staff and potentially patrons. There is also some we have pricing for Vega as part of our original negotiations in 2020. It includes 5 years of pricing. We have not, I'll get to that part in a second about contracts, but so essentially they're offering us a seat at the table and a voice in the process. And in return, they're asking for us staff time, working with them to gather feedback from library staff and patrons. And then these last 2 bullets are kind of our big sticking point is, they're asking for a commitment to make Vega available in a beta testing situation, and then to replace our existing Power Pack with Discover. So as part of the original kind of negotiations, they presented me with a development partner agreement. That agreement was cancelable at any time. We could drop out of the program, cancel the agreement, no money ever changed hands, so nothing to be refunded or owed or whatever. It did include 5 years of pricing for Vega. Executive committee approved that partner agreement. And then when I said, all right, I'm ready to sign it, they sent me the partner agreement as well as a subscription contract, a subscription for Vega Discover. And I was like, well, I can't sign that. I was not approved to sign that. I can't sign a subscription agreement for a product that doesn't exist. So that in the end, I never signed it. As far as I know, all of the other development partners have signed it. And it's not in happy conversations, it's not effective until they're live on the product, but the effective date of the contract was also in the contract, effective date was the date the contract was signed. So I felt very uncomfortable with that. We had a lot of negotiations about it. I never signed it. We're still a member of the partner program. Our partner development contract did also actually expire in June of this year. So we're technically not under any agreement at this time. So I feel I was very clear from the beginning that my governing board, per our policies, has to approve the use of any product in a production environment. I can't just say, okay, we're ready to adopt Vega, let's turn on Vega Discover. Governing board needs to vote on it. So that is why I could not sign the contract. And when they're like, when are you going to go live? My answer is when my board votes that they're ready to do so. And they may never vote that we're ready to do so. So eventually they're going to be like, are you guys ever going to go live? And I'm going to be like, if and when the board votes, that's when we'll go live. So, technically we have committed to replacing our existing discovery solution with Vega Discover within 6 months of general availability. But then I said, when is general availability for consortia? And their answer is, well, some consortia are using it. I was like, well, that's everything's very nebulous, and they're not pushing us to go live. They're largely concerned, I think, about optics if we drop the program, because that doesn't look good for them. But to sum up my very long-winded answer, the point of us getting into this program was so we could advocate for consortial needs before the product was released, instead of what we've seen repeatedly with all of these vendors is they release a product and then we're like, but that doesn't work for our type of consortium.
Yep.
And so to that end, I feel like we have been very successful in the project and we continue to have a great deal of influence. There are not a lot of consortial development partners. And another one is Pinnacle, which is organized much the same way that CCS is. So we tend to very much be in agreement on how things should work and what would benefit us. So that I think has been really beneficial. I think at this time, I feel like unless they're pressuring us that we have to go live or make a decision about when we're going live, to Scott's point, it doesn't really hurt us to continue with the program. There was like a few month period where I was like, this is a huge waste of our time. Like nothing they say ever matters, but they have had some staff replacements. And I do think communication has improved and that there is some more accountability that's happening in the development process.
So can I just, sorry, Rebecca, just as you describe this, one concern that I have about this whole thing is it feels like the question that we're going after is kind of reversed here. Like we wanted to be part of a development partner as opposed to we wanted a new discovery platform. And that it because, and I'm just saying even from governing board, and I might be wrong, but it feels like there's even this question of like, do we even like, we're not unhappy necessarily we have right now. So why are we going through this? And so I in retrospect, I think it would have been better for the executive committee to have had that discussion to say, okay, do we want to move platforms? And then if we do we want to be a development partner, as opposed to saying, the way you've described it, it sounds like, well, we want to be a development partner to advocate for consortiums, but that's really kind of going at, it feels a little bit like that's putting the cart before the horse to me. And so, I think it'd be beneficial in the future to have some type of executive summary that the executive committee is saying, this is exactly what we're trying to accomplish with this project, and kind of all that out, so that it's very clear that it's like we're really looking for a discovery platform, and we think that being a development partner is going to get us to the best product that we want as to what we've had in the future. That's just my take on it, just from I don't know if that's that helpful, in terms of where we're at now, but that's just a little bit of what it kind of feels like to me.
I think that's very insightful, and I think summarizes the perspective I've been here, that I hear at governing board in a way that helps me. So thank you.
And don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm absolutely supportive of being a development partner. So I'm not, and I think that there's been a lot of great work that's gone into it. But I think making sure that there's that clear, this is what we're really looking to be, that discovery, or we need a new discovery platform, and being crystal clear with that, so that everybody's on that page, I think it would really help us. And so I don't know, I know you don't want to do a full RFP, but it's like, it almost feels like we have to have some type of agreement that is what we're that there is agreement from governing board that we want to be on a new discovery platform. I mean, do you feel like we have that, or do you feel like that still needs to be kind of hashed out?
Well, aren't we
say
trying to make sure that the vendor has the best discovery platform rather than looking for a third-party add-on? I thought this goal was to try to help the people who we actually use the guts of the database. We would help them to create a product that meets all of our needs.
I think also early on in the discussion, I thought that Innovative was also indicating that at some point this was going to replace what we had. And that we figured if we were going to have to work with it later, we should be involved in designing it the way we can use it.
Yes, and there's no timeline on when that will happen.
Right.
But PowerPack is going to be the legacy product that doesn't get development time or dollars. So it's going to essentially become stagnant. It doesn't mean it's going to stop working, but it's not going to get better. Yes. Yeah, I think it's a hard thing, right? Like, I think, what Diane, Scott, and Brian are saying are all very true. Like, to Brian's point, we don't need a new discovery layer right now. We haven't said Power Pack is not working for us. We need something new. But we know that Power Pack's not going to be around forever. And eventually we'll have to make some sort of change. This is an opportunity to help impact what that change will look like. But it's like, okay, but eventually doesn't have to be next year. And that's kind of the tension we're at now. Like, Power Pack is working fine. Vegas still has work to do. We have these other projects coming up. Are we okay to just like coast with this program and see where things go? And by coast with this program, I mean, continue to provide valuable insight and feedback and continue to work towards an excellent product. But yeah, I mean, it's a limited market. I have some pretty significant concerns about, let's say that Power Pack, like in 2 years, they're not going to develop Power Pack anymore. And it's going to be a legacy product, and it's going to turn into iBistro for those of you around during the iBistro days. Like, yeah, we don't want to be on iBistro. When we look at, but we like Polaris and we like Leap, so we need something to go over it. What we're going to be left with, at least as the market stands today, is BiblioCommons, Aspen, and whatever, Innovative is replacing it with. So right now we know that's Vega. I did include, like, I'm not here to like rule anything out right now, but like, I have some very significant concerns about how BiblioCommons will work in the consortial environment that are not related to how BiblioCommons did work 10 years ago. I wasn't here. I don't know how that was. I don't know anything about it. I just know what we're seeing with the Glenview setup and how that is working. And it's going to work great for Glenview. I think they're going to be really happy with it. But I think in our larger consortial environment, I'd have more concerns about the amount of workarounds and sort of finagling that would have to happen to make things work. That said, a lot of that's around e-content, and we're also doing some research into how important it is to have e-content in the catalog. So that's a separate question. Aspen, I think, has a lot of really good features. I think that the support team and the development team with Aspen has a really good track record. That said, it is an open source product. And, you're dependent on kind of individual developers in a way that you're not when you're looking at a product from a more established company. Again, I think we're down to 3 options if we chose to make a change. Will those same 3 options be there in 5 years? Will there be more options? Will there be fewer? The way the market's going, I doubt there would be more. So again, is now the right time for us to switch? I don't know. The product's not ready. So it's, to me, kind of a moot point. But if I had to say, like, if we had to switch tomorrow and we didn't have time to do a full RFP, I would not be cartwheeling towards BiblioCommons or Aspen.
I
So
really
take that for what you will.
I really appreciate the explanation. I feel like I've got a lot better picture on it now. So it sounds like we're playing a long game, right? Whether we need it now or whether we need it in 5 years, we're gonna need, right, a new overlay. We've been not unhappy with Polaris Leap. The cost to coasting, right, is minimal because we have not signed a contract for implementation, which is especially good since we don't know when it's going to be really. I mean, you said there are some consortia that are using it now, but it's still not fully developed. Is that inaccurate?
From our perspective, it is not fully developed. From their perspective that have chosen to go live, it meets their needs.
So not a lot of cost involved in hanging in there, continuing with the current strategy. So, okay, well, I appreciate that. I feel like I got a handle on the situation now. Thank you.
What do you need from us today?
So when it comes to governing board, I think there's been and I think this is my fault with how I've presented things in the development schedule, but I think there's a little bit of a sentiment of like, well, are we doing it or not? Let's decide, are we doing it or not? So do we, I said at the last meeting, like, all right, we'll kick the can and we'll look at doing a vote in January. So should this be an agenda topic every governing board? And the report out is, we're not ready yet, we're going to keep working with the program and that's the end of it? Or should we be kind of diving into these broader questions? Like, I don't have a clear sense of kind of where the membership's at with this. Like, if this is just like an internal project that CCS is doing and nobody has to do anything with it unless they want to volunteer to be a beta library, like, that's cool. I'm fine with that. But if governing, I got in the past a sense that there was a feeling that we weren't being like transparent and people didn't know what was going on. So I want to kind of toe that line. And so I'm looking for kind of your perception and understanding of where that situation is with your colleagues.
I'll just go ahead and say, I tend to be pretty Pollyanna, so I don't know if something's right. I have no sense if there's any kind of problem. I certainly haven't sensed that there's anything like, oh, why aren't we doing something on Vega? That's not to say that it's not there, but it's not something that I've been aware of.
I haven't
Maybe-
heard either. I haven't heard anything either, that's like, like, what are we doing here? We got to pull the trigger, we got to like move forward with something. I think the way you framed it, and especially with, the context Scott provided, that perspective of, this is us potentially charting our own future, or at least making it so that it's as good of an option as we could make it for the future, makes a lot of sense. And if it's maybe an update and a managing of expectations, that it's not necessarily a deliverable or a problem we're trying to solve, might go a long way.
Yeah, it would take 5-10 minutes at a governing board meeting to explain to everybody, and then, just say, we're tracking it. That's pretty much what you're doing.
Yeah, it's being proactive, not necessarily reactive to an issue or a need.
I'm noting furiously. I think that all makes sense. I'm comfortable with that. Deborah, that's good for you and as our main rep.
I think so. I do think we will continue to get some pressure from III to soft launch and to schedule an official launch, and based on their schedule, which again continues to flux backwards from where they promised, we would anticipate that would happen sometime in Q1 or Q2 of 2023. So I suppose my question for this group is, when that happens, what is the expectation for CCS and how would we manage that? And then a question burning in my mind that doesn't have to get answered today, and we can talk about in the future, is if we are to make a final decision on Vega or any discovery interface, would the expectation from governance be that we go out to RFP? Like for that, or, is there comfort in saying at some point we would adopt Vega without going out to RFP? And again, maybe these
I
aren't
will
questions
just
to be answered today, but.
I think those are excellent questions. I will say that I'm very comfortable discussing why aren't you launching with Innovative? Like, I feel like we can have the longest beta that's ever, like, oh, schedules changed. Look at that. I'm very comfortable kind of managing those discussions. And I think if we got to a point where we did do a soft launch and had that additional feedback from users, I think governing board would be in a much stronger place to make a decision and say, gosh, this really is a product that could add value to our patrons or not. And then that would kind of eliminate the question. I do think your question about, an RFP is a good one. And I would say we should, unless someone has strong feelings they want to talk about today, consider that at a future meeting. Because I got to think about it.
Okay, I feel like that makes sense. Are there any other thoughts or any other, clear instructions you need from this committee at this time, Rebecca?
No, and Deborah and I will continue to work together on responses within the program, et cetera, and we'll plan to have a short overview at governing board in January and see where we're at that time.
Okay. Thank you. See no one else looking eager to add to the conversation. Are there any other innovative updates from Deborah or you at this time, Rebecca?
Deborah's continuing. Go ahead, Deborah. Yeah.
I was going to say we're working with Innovative to troubleshoot and find us like a permanent solution to the email and text delivery issues we've been experiencing over the past month and a half. So we have been, thank you to all of your libraries who have reported issues to us with, emails and texts being blocked by providers and spam filters. We've reported each instance to Innovative and are really pressing them to come up with a solution. I don't have an update on what that solution will be, but again, we're in constant communication with them and hope, the pressure we're putting on them will lead to a fix for that.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Deborah? Okay, seeing none. The next on the agenda, and I have my annotated agenda, but I marked it up with the change, Rebecca, just make sure I get it right. This next is making the determination about changes to the membership services manager position. Okay, fantastic. So Rebecca's, she had shared with us an updated job description for the membership services manager to director of membership services to reflect expanded responsibilities of position with increased focus on services delivered through membership services. She shared the job description. It has been benchmarked by HR Source. And just to reiterate what Rebecca had sent us via email for the committee's discussion of this topic, if we stick to the position, the work, the job description, we'll do that in open session. If the conversation needs to evolve into anything about a specific, the work of a specific employee, we'll take appropriate next steps in closed session to go into closed session for that. So I understand that Rebecca's seeking approval of the job description and adjusted compensation effective December 1st. Rebecca, is there anything you'd add to tee this up?
I would just like to thank folks who sent feedback ahead of time. So Scott on his Eagle Eye RE closed session. And then Brian also asked via email if this is something we actually need approval on, as it's, a staffing issue with, and I'm the executive director. So this is the first time that, at least since I've been here, we're looking at kind of a significant change to a job description. In the past, when we've added headcount, we've brought that to executive committee. But when we've made smaller updates to job descriptions, we have not. So this is sort of in between. I'd rather err on the side of getting an approval and having documentation, but also if the committee feels like this is not something that we need to kind of dive into, that's fine with me as well.
Yeah, I think, my main question that I had for Rebecca was whether this was a position that would be changed regardless of the incumbent in the position. So, regardless of whether Deborah's here or not, if Deborah were to leave, 4 months from now, would this position, the new job description be the job description that she would be looking to hire for? And Rebecca, you said, yes, this would be, what you would anticipate going forward with in terms of the needs of the organization. And I think that to me tells me, it's a needed position. It's, we have a great person in place that obviously can do the work, but it's like really for the long-term needs of the organization, this is what you're identifying as being a needed change. And so supportive of it, as a result. I think whether the executive committee needs to approve or not, I think that's certainly could be up for discussion, but I'm comfortable with it being something that the executive director would make a determination on.
I will second that, what Brian said. As long as it's, within the salary budget that we've approved, I don't have any problems with the executive director making that decision.
I will say I really
Yes.
appreciate understanding, how we got here. It's very exciting. It's really, really great. So I think unless there are any objections, it seems like that's the will of the committee to defer to the executive director on this matter, but to thank you for keeping us updated on the inner workings of your team. Any other thoughts on this?
My only thought is I went through something with someone retiring, and I know that Deborah's younger, but if there's a significant pay increase with that over 6% in your IMRF, I would document the changes in responsibility. We had to go back and do that with a person, and it's a lot easier if it's upfront. So.
Yeah, we are not in IMRF, but I think that documenting is good either way. So we'll make some notes on that. Anyway, thank you for that.
Just as an aside, IMRF put out an announcement that they're going to be increasing to 6% to adjust for inflation. They haven't said what the amount is yet, but it's going to maybe jump up to 8% or so. So tell your boards, we all get big raises this year.
Ooh, thank you, Scott. Okay, if there's no further discussion on this topic, we'll move on to the next. Okay, which is an adjournment to closed session. I'll read the
Can I
thing.
pause you? Sorry, can I pause you super quickly?
Of course.
In your packet on page 46, you'll see we don't actually have any closed session minutes to review. So if the committee is comfortable, all we're looking for is a vote to destroy verbatim recordings of closed session meeting minutes that have already been approved and in fact released. So if you don't want to move into closed session to have that discussion, we don't have to. So I'll leave that up to you.
I don't think it's necessary for me. Anyone else feel like it needs to be reviewed about the verbatim recordings?
I don't want to go into closed session because then that gives us an additional set of closed session minutes to review.
Okay, well, so unless there's any other discussion about whether or not we go into closed session, we could entertain a motion. The potential motion here is to destroy the verbatim recordings of closed session meetings from May 12th, 2021, effective on November 12th, 2022.
So moved.
Thank you,
I'll
Laura.
second.
Thank you, Pam. No discussion? Then we'll go right to Beth. Thank you.
Can I just confirm the second was Pam?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Davis,
Yes.
Dilger,
Yes.
Leffler,
Yes.
sorry, McNulty,
Yes.
Rosenthal,
Yes.
Shepherd,
Yes.
and Smith.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So efficient. Well done, everybody. We'll move on to reports. No president's report, secretary report,
No report.
and treasurer.
No report.
Okay, committees and groups, thank you for the information shared. Any questions for Deborah? Or Deborah, anything you'd like, did Deborah come back yet? No.
That's fine. I can take questions if you have any. I have nothing to add.
Okay. Seeing none, on to the executive director report, please.
My report has been submitted in the packet. If there are any questions on anything contained in it or otherwise, I'm happy to take them.
Okay, well done. You've got all the bases covered.
Oh, no, I lied. There are two things. One is, or just one thing. It's not an anniversary we celebrate, but Bob is on, or that we formally recognize, but Bob hits 35 years at CCS on November 30th. So that's amazing.
Thank you for your service, Bob. Wow. Yeah,
That was it for real this time.
that's fantastic. All right, so if there is no other business that anyone needs to bring forward, I don't see any. So unless there are any objections, I would adjourn the meeting at 11:21 a.m. Okay, seeing none, meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.